Now at the bottom of the screen, you're going to see your action items, and some of your action items down here, including map. Now, if you wanted to, print out a larger scale map of where these properties are located, you can select the map icon on the bottom of the screen after, of course, you pick your properties, and that will display a map for you plotting those properties. And you can see on the bottom of the screen, each property is numbered, and the reference point then is plotted on the map for you. If you hover over one of those little markers on the map, it will show you a picture and it'll give you some information about that property. So you can kind of like walk the map and just kind of verify that everything is the way it should be. Now, if you wanted to print this map, there is a printer-friendly button on here, so you're more than welcome to do that. You can also switch this over to the aerial views if you prefer, and you can print from there. Again, that's your choice if you prefer to print the map from here. Now, we'll give you a little bit of foreshadowing. There is a map included in your CMA package that will include all these comparables as you see right here. But just in case you wanted to print them out for some other reason, this would be a really good place to do that. So if you want to print it, you can print it. If not, you can close this window out. On the bottom of the screen, we of course have our driving directions, our download capability, our CMA, and that's where we're going to go to in just a minute. But over to the right of the CMA, there's two additional buttons. There's a statistics button, and you've had that before in Temple 4. That gives you the basic statistics. It breaks it down by statuses and gives you some columns to work with and just some raw numbers to look at. Again, it's not pretty, but it is functional if you just need to get some basic information, and that can be printed. You also have the Quick CMA button to the right of that. And the Quick CMA is more or less the one-line CMA. It's non-customizable. You can't change the columns. You can't sort the columns. Pretty much it is what it is. But this is one of those CMAs where you can say, hey, out of these four sold properties, the average sale price was $222,475. The average total square foot was $2,736. So if you're just wanting to quote some numbers, or you just need some really quick facts and you don't want to go into a complete full-blown CMA, the Quick CMA is a really good way to do that. And this can be printed out, and it can also be emailed. So I know a lot of agents across the country are actually using this to just basically, search for your comps, get in and get out the door with your facts and figures, and then possibly come back and do a more comprehensive CMA later on. So again, another option that you have available to you. The one we're going to talk about today, though, in a lot of detail is the CMA. And on the bottom of the screen, you see a little icon that says CMA. When you hover over it, it says CMA Wizard. That's going to take us into the CMA program. So remember, I've already done my search for my comparable properties. I've done the hardest part of the CMA. Then I'm going to just say, take those properties and bring them into my CMA Wizard by clicking on the CMA program. So the good thing is, now when I get into this wizard in just a minute, I'm not going to have to sit there and spend, 30, 40 minutes searching for quality comps. I've spent that already. Now, the CMA Wizard is exactly that. Whenever you think of a wizard, think of something that helps you build something. If you've ever installed software before on a computer, you get an install wizard, and you kind of keep clicking next and next and next and kind of hoping it says finish, you're done correctly. Well, the CMA Wizard helps you a little bit more than that. All of the steps you need are on the left-hand side, and I only see one step right now because once I get past this first step, then it will open up the rest of the CMA for me. And it's very important that you at least get past this first step because once you do that, your CMA is actually saved, and then you can come back and pick it up where you left off. But that doesn't happen until you get past step number one. And step number one is really easy to fill out. I mean, there's a couple of questions here. What type of CMA is this? A seller or a buyer CMA? Well, by default, we have seller checked here, and that'll give you all the different pages and reports that are relative to a seller, like the seller's net sheet. If I choose the buyer CMA, the reports will change a little bit. I'll have a buyer's closing cost estimate as one of my reports. So again, just depends on which one you pick. By default, again, the seller is selected. There are two additional options here that say Seller Quick and Buyer Quick. That's not the same thing as what we saw on the previous page where I showed you the Quick CMA. Once you get more familiar with the program, you can use one of these options, and what it will do for you, it'll take all of the information and quickly put it together for you without allowing you to do any editing along the way. And then you can go back and edit pages if you need to. So initially, I don't want to show you that simply because I want to show you how to make the changes, because if you were to do this, you'd have to go back and do it anyway. So, let's just take kind of the long route here, and once you know the long route, then you can use the quick route later on if you want to. So I'm going to keep it as a seller CMA here. The next box says select the property type. Well, residential is already selected for me and highlighted, and it's selected for me, and I can't change it because I've already done my property search based on a residential search. So there's nothing I need to do here. I can't click it. I can't change it. Select a contact. Here's where you're going to go and choose a contact you already have saved in the Tempo 5 system, or you're going to add a new contact directly from here if this person is already not saved as a contact. So if they're not saved, you have to create them. If they're saved already, then you can simply pick them from a list, and then you've now tied that CMA to that particular individual. If for some reason you need to make any edits to that particular contact, you can always go to Edit Contact, and if you need to make any changes, you can of course make the changes there if you need to. So it's like the chicken or the egg, which came first? The contact or the CMA, you can do it either way. The name for this CMA, we give the CMA a standard naming convention. It's called the seller CMA for whoever that person would be. If this is a buyer CMA, notice the name just changes to buyer CMA for that person. I recommend you don't really rename this. Just leave it as it is. It pretty much tells you exactly what you're doing, why you're doing it, and who you're doing it for. That way when you go to your CMA manager, all of them will be named the same except for the person that you're creating it for. It just keeps it a little more standard. The next checkbox on the bottom says use contact's home address as a subject property. Well, if you've taken the time to fill in enough information about this contact and you've included their address in their contact record, yes, and that happens to be the seller's property, you can check this button and that will carry some information over to the next page. Again, it's really not that relevant. If you check it, fine. If you don't check it, it doesn't have a lot of bearing on the next part of the CMA. So, your choice. At the bottom of the screen, you've got 3 buttons. The first button, previous step, is grayed out. You can't go back from step number 1. You can cancel if you want to, and if you cancel from here, you're basically saying, I quit, I don't want to do this anymore. And the third option that you can see here is the next step, and that will go ahead and get you on to the next part of the CMA. Again, keep in mind, get past this step, and it will save your CMA. So this really should say next step and save everything I've done to this point. Just keep that in mind. So when I click on the next step, it's going to update my CMA. In other words, it's saving this particular step, and it's also saving all those comparable properties that I worked so hard to get at this point. So that's the main benefit of it. Now if you were to close this out, notice it doesn't say cancel anymore, it says close. If you were to close this out, your CMA would be saved, and you could go back and refine it again in your CMA manager. Notice also the additional steps open up for you. Now we're in step number 2, which says this is the subject property, and this is where you're going to enter or find the information for the subject property. Now there's 3 ways to do this. We'll start out with the easiest way first. If this property has ever been listed before in the MLS, you can go back and search for it and import or bring in all that information as your subject property sheet goes. And you do that by going to the bottom of the screen. Well, actually, you first ask your seller, has your property ever been listed in the MLS before? And if they say yes, then you start going, I'm happy now. I can do this a lot quicker. If they say no, I'll show you some other options for you. So import subject property from an MLS search. So I'd go to the MLS search, and it's going to bring up just a simple search screen for me. And now I could search for that property in the MLS records. Now keep in mind, if this property has been listed before in the past, it's probably not one of the statuses you see here. It's probably been canceled or sold or expired or something else. So what I recommend you do is select all the statuses, and you can do that by double-clicking, and it will highlight all of the statuses for you at this point. Then you could come down here and you could enter the address of the subject property into the address box, which would be the street number and the street name, and then you could find that particular property. Or maybe you've already done the homework already and looked up the property and you have the old MLS number. Well, I can go ahead and type that in too, run my search, and there's the property right there. Now remember, if I would not have chosen all statuses, it wouldn't have brought up this property, which was in the past canceled. If this is the property that I want to use as my subject property, I select it from the list, choose Select Record Property as my subject, and it will automatically bring all of that property information into my CMA Wizard. Now, a question came up yesterday is if I search by address and it's been listed multiple times under different MLS numbers, will they all show up? And the answer is, of course they will. They'll all show up just like when you do a history or archive search. The next question was, which one do I pick? Probably the most current one or the most recent status would be the best one. So if it sold 4 years ago and it sold 2 years ago, I would probably pick the one that sold 2 years ago because the information might be a little more current and updated on the sheet itself. Now you can see, look what it did. It imported or brought in all of this information from the MLS data. Now, as an agent, you're now going to go ahead and you're going to just make sure that everything is still correct here. So you're going to kind of do a little audit on all of this information. And to do that, just you kind of walk down the list and say, you know what, wow, they you know, maybe the fireplace, maybe they have, you know, they had a gas one and now it's wood, or maybe it was, you know, wood and now gas. So you want to make sure you update that information. You know, as far as the fence goes, you know, maybe the fence is all around now versus just the rear. So maybe they've done some updates since this property was originally listed a couple of years ago, let's say. So take the time to go back and verify that all this information is correct. Notice it also brings in the picture from the MLS. Now, if for some reason that picture is something that you don't want to use, maybe it's a really bad picture, you can always delete that photo and upload one of your own as the subject property if you want to do that. And then notice it also maps the property based on the address of the property for you. So again, it brings pretty much all that information in for you. Now, let's say that you're not as fortunate to be able to find that property in the MLS system. Let's say the property was never listed before, it's an original owner, they've had the house for 30 years. The only other option you have is to go to reallist.com, which is your public records. Click on reallist.com and you can search for the property by the county it's in. You can use the address or the owner name or the parcel number to find that property. And if the property happens to be in the public records, you can then import information into this particular page. Now, I will warn you, you're not going to get all of this information. In fact, you're going to get a very limited set of information, but it's still better than nothing. And then you kind of have to fill the blanks in around it. The other option you have is if you could not get it from the MLS or for some reason it wasn't in the public records, you would have to manually type in all of this information, and that's the worst case scenario. So first thing I would do is ask, has the property ever been listed in the MLS before? If so, go to here. If not, go to RealList, and if you can't find it there for some reason, then again, you're basically typing it in all by yourself.